It was supposed to be a peaceful summer afternoon, but that quiet day turned into something no one would forget. The Shaw family had never imagined they'd end up in court, facing off against their neighbors over a vicious dog bite. What started as a friendly visit between two teenagers spiraled into a painful incident, a family argument, and finally, a courtroom battle under the sharp eye of Judge Judy Sheindlin. Ms. Shaw was the mother of a young girl who had been bitten, twice, by a pit bull named Charity. The dog belonged to the defendant, Mrs. Thomas, who was sitting in court beside her teenage son, Talek. The courtroom was tense from the very beginning. Judge Judy, calm but razor-focused, leaned forward from the bench as she tried to piece together what really happened that June afternoon. Ms. Shaw wasn't there when her daughter was attacked. She'd heard the story secondhand, and all her knowledge came from her injured daughter and the hospital visit that followed. Meanwhile, the defendant, Mrs. Thomas, also hadn't seen the attack. She admitted she was upstairs when it happened. The only eyewitness who truly knew what took place was her son, Talek, the boy at the center of it all. When Judge Judy turned her sharp gaze toward him, the boy shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He was young, polite, and clearly nervous under pressure. He confirmed that he knew the injured girl from school. They were friends, and she had been to his house a few times before the bite. That day, June 13th, was supposed to be a fun, creative day. They were going to tie-dye shirts together at another friend's house. It was summer, school was out, and the kids were just looking for something to do. Before the incident, the girl had seen the dog once before. A few days earlier, after a trip to the beach with friends, they'd stopped by Talek's house. His father had brought the pit bull outside on a leash so the girls could meet her. The dog named Charity had seemed calm that day, alert but not aggressive. The girls had petted her, laughed, and gone on their way. Nothing about that meeting suggested danger. But on June 13th, things went differently. Talek, on his bike, rode ahead of his friends to grab a shirt from his house before heading to tie-dye. He planned to get the shirt quickly, maybe grab a snack, and then rejoin the others. His friends, Savannah and Ms. Shaw's daughter, followed behind on foot and rollerblades, chatting as they approached the Thomas home. When they arrived, the front wooden door of the house was open, and only the screen door separated them from the inside. They waited on the porch, talking softly, expecting their friend to come back out in a minute or two. Inside, upstairs, Talek was rummaging through his dad's room, grabbing the shirt he needed. As he came back down the stairs, he called for Charity, the family dog. He didn't see any danger in letting her come down. She was a pit bull but generally well-behaved. He headed toward the kitchen for a quick snack, put his phone on the counter, and then, for reasons he couldn't clearly explain, changed his mind. Something, maybe a noise, maybe a feeling, pulled him back toward the front door. When Judge Judy asked why he left the kitchen so suddenly, he hesitated. He couldn't give a clear reason. Maybe he'd heard the girls talking outside. Maybe he just wanted to check. Whatever the reason, by the time he reached the front door, it was already too late. Outside on the porch, the two girls were still waiting. Then, in an instant, everything changed. The dog, Charity, lunged at the screen door with such force that it burst open. Before anyone could react, the pit bull charged straight at Ms. Shaw's daughter. The girl barely had time to scream. Charity sank her teeth into her arm, and when the girl turned to get away, the dog bit her leg, dragging her down into the grass. Savannah froze in shock before running to help, yelling for someone to come. It all happened so fast, seconds that felt like hours. By the time Talek got to the door, the dog was already outside and the attack had happened. The air was filled with chaos, shouting, crying, confusion. The girl's arm and leg were bleeding badly. Neighbors peeked from their windows. The once friendly scene had turned into panic. Later, the girl was rushed to the hospital. The bites were serious and required stitches. Ms. Shaw, horrified, filed a claim against Mrs. Thomas, demanding compensation for the injury and pain her daughter had suffered. She believed the Thomas family had been careless with a dangerous animal. Mrs. Thomas, on the other hand, was defensive and emotional. She loved her dog and didn't want to believe Charity could have done such a thing unprovoked. When the case came before Judge Judy, both families told their side. Ms. Shaw explained how her daughter was innocent, standing outside, doing nothing wrong. She emphasized that the dog had broken through the screen door on its own and that the children hadn't taunted or provoked it. Mrs. Thomas, however, had filed a counterclaim. She claimed the girls had been tormenting the dog, kicking the door and scaring it, causing Charity to act out of fear. And to make matters worse, she was demanding $1,500 from Ms. Shaw to compensate for the loss of the dog, which had been taken away after the attack. Judge Judy listened carefully, her tone sharp and no nonsense. She examined every detail, every inconsistency. She turned to Mrs. Thomas. "You weren't there when it happened, right?" Mrs. Thomas admitted she wasn't. "So everything you wrote in your answer came from your son?" Judge Judy pressed. "Yes," the woman replied. Then Judge Judy turned back to the boy. "Talik, when you got to the front door, the dog was already out, wasn't it?" He hesitated, but finally nodded. "Yes, that was it. The truth that tied everything together." The story Mrs. Thomas had written about the girls kicking the door didn't match her son's account. He hadn't seen them do anything wrong. He hadn't seen them provoke the dog. He'd simply found Charity outside after the attack had already happened. Judge Judy leaned back in her chair, her eyes narrowing in understanding. She spoke clearly, dissecting the logic of the case in front of everyone. "It doesn't make sense that he went to the kitchen to get a snack, left his phone there, and suddenly decided to go to the front door for no reason," she said. Something changed his mind. Something made him move, and that something was the commotion he heard when the dog broke through the screen and attacked. Mrs. Thomas tried to protest, but Judge Judy silenced her with a wave of her hand. "There was no taunting, no banging, no kicking," she said firmly. "Your son didn't see any of that. What he heard was the sound of your dog attacking that young girl." The courtroom went silent. Ms. Shaw looked relieved. Mrs. Thomas looked defeated. Judge Judy, known for her direct and uncompromising approach, didn't hesitate. "Judgment for the plaintiff in the amount of $5,000, she declared. "Your counterclaim is dismissed." And that was that. The gavel fell with a sharp crack, ending the case. For Ms. Shaw and her daughter, it was a small victory. Justice for the pain and fear they had endured. For Mrs. Thomas and her son, it was a hard lesson about responsibility and honesty. The dog, once a rescue meant to be loved and cared for, had caused a chain of events that would haunt both families for a long time. As the courtroom emptied, the air was heavy but calm. Judge Judy's words lingered, sharp and final. She had seen through confusion and excuses, cutting straight to the truth, as she always did. One careless moment, one open door, and one dog's sudden aggression had turned a normal day into a courtroom drama. But by the end, justice, clear and uncompromising, had found its way through. That day reminded everyone watching that Judge Judy wasn't just a TV personality. She was a force of clarity, logic, and truth. And when she said, "That's all," everyone knew she meant it.